Good to be with you, my friends. Now we'll see if we can do the whole process. There we go. It's working this week. All right. So, not last week, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we had the chapter on Isaac, that information about him, where he becomes too wealthy to stay in town with the Pharisees. I mean, not with the Pharisees, excuse me, with the, oh gosh, I can't think of their names. Well, it was a anachronistic listing of folks. But anyway, he chooses peace over conflict. Philistines, there we go. He chose peace over conflict. He kept sort of moving around and trying to make peace with them. And then finally they do have peace with Abimelech. And the future is sort of secured. So today we jump into, well, really, it becomes Jacob's story from this point on, but it's the 27th chapter. And again, we looked at this, I guess, about 3 weeks ago, but I've certainly slept since then. And the PowerPoint didn't work last time, so we'll look at it this time. So now when Yitzhak was old and his eyes had become too dim for seeing, he called Esau, his elder son, and said to him, "My son." And he said to him, "Here I am, Hineni." And he said to him, "Now here, I have grown old and do not know the day of my death. So now pray, pick up your weapons, your hanging quiver and your bow. Go out into the field and hunt me down some hunted game and make me a delicacy such as I love. Bring it to me and I will eat it, that I may give you my own blessing before I die." So this is how and now, interestingly enough, almost everybody agrees on this. Scholars tend to divide it up differently, but there's 4 divisions for this chapter with a slight code at the end. The first is Isaac and Esau, verses 1 through 4, right? They're in this first initial scene that sort of sets the stage. Part 2 is Rebekah and Jacob, verses 5 through 17. Rebekah overhears what's happening and sort of plots with her son Jacob. Part 3, Jacob goes in and deceives Isaac. And then part 4, Isaac and Esau figure out that they've been duped and the birthright and blessing now have been taken from Esau, right? So that's the rough division for the chapter. There's actually another 8 verses at the end that's a coda of Rebekah and Jacob realizing that there's consequences to their actions. So it's really a 5 division, but it sort of morphs. But the main part of the story is verses 1 through, these parts 1 through 4, right? The first 40 verses. And so what we effectively get is this conversation between Isaac and Esau that sets the whole story in motion, right? Isaac old, he's blind, he wants to give his blessing to Esau because he realizes he's getting closer to the end of life than the beginning. It's not clear, of course, in the story, nor does the story particularly care if Isaac is truly on his deathbed or if he just has decided now is the time to do it when he's still able to do it. And what does he want? He wants a good home-cooked, fresh venison kind of a meal. That's about all we really know about the story. It doesn't give us a lot of detail, and nor do I think that those details particularly matter, other than to say that this is something that that Isaac has decided to work on and to do as the patriarch of the family, right? So we'll take a couple of minutes just because we need to talk about blessing, right? Why is this such a big deal here in the verses ahead? Because quite frankly, I'll be honest, as a priest, I bless people and things all the time. People will bring crosses to me. I'll bless crosses. I'll go and do house blessings. I will bless the entire congregation before they leave the room. So we have a little bit of a, I don't know if it's a cheaper view of blessing, but it's not the same view of this sort of exclusive blessing, right? That you can only pronounce once. And even then once and once only. But any thoughts about, I mean, there's not really much to say about it, but any thoughts about this initial part before we jump into the blessing side of it? Okay. So, oh no, we'll talk about that for the next section. But so we'll go ahead and jump into this next part, which is really the plot, right? So now Rivka or Rebecca was listening as Yitzhak spoke to Esau, his son. And so when Esau went off into the fields to hunt down hunted game to bring to him, Rivka said to Yaakov, her son, Here, I was listening as your father spoke to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me some hunted game and make me a delicacy. I will eat it and give you blessing before the Lord, before my death. So now, my son, listen to my voice, to what I command you. Pray, go to the flock, take me 2 fine goat kids from there. I will make them into a delicacy for your father, such as he loves. You bring it to your father, and he will eat it, so that he may give you blessing before his death. Yaakov said to Rivkah, his mother, here, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me. Then I will be like a trickster in his eyes, and I will bring a curse and not a blessing on myself. His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Only listen to my voice and go. Take them for me. He went and took and brought them to his mother, and his mother made a delicacy such as his father loved. Rivkah then took the garments of Esau, her elder son, the choicest ones that were with her in the house, and clothed Yaakov, her younger son. And with the skin of the goat kids, she clothed his hands and the smooth parts of his neck. And then she placed the delicacy and the bread that she had made in the hands of Yaakov, her son. All right, so the deception begins, right? We see what we ultimately see is not Jacob, but Rebekah as the master planner and plotter. Rabbis take a lot of time to talk about this, about how Jacob certainly has his issues and his plots. But Isaac ultimately is passive, even in the chapter before, right? He kept moving, and just like if somebody said, well, that's my well, or we're taking it from you, Isaac even then was very passive. He was passive for the binding. He's passive in those arguments before, and now Rebekah is the one who really is the thrust of the narrative, right? It's not Isaac. Isaac just says, I'm going to bless you, and otherwise he's a pretty passive figure. It's Rivkah, who is the master planner, the plotter, the person who is active, and it's through her that God's hand seems to, or at least God's prophecy certainly, is fulfilled. The key part, though, of course, is Jacob does not refuse. He just worries about getting caught and getting a curse instead. It's not that he decides that this is a bad idea, just he doesn't want to get caught, right? It's a fascinating character. So Jacob is a fascinating character because from start to finish, he's really not a very good guy, right? He's already deceived his brother, or not deceived him, but swindled his brother out of his birthright. Now he's working to get the blessing. It's not a great view for Jacob, right? So Brueggemann then notes, which I think is right, in the narrative, neither Jacob nor Rebekah evokes any positive feeling from the listener. That's sort of the understatement, right? Neither of them are good characters, or at least positive ones. They get the job done, but you see them in that sort of raw political backstabbing role at this point, right? Or plotting role. They want to get it, and they're absolute about it. Yet Brueggemann asked the rhetorical question, are they living into the oracle? That is, if you remember from 2 chapters ago, when Jacob and Esau are born, there is this oracle that God pronounces that says the older will serve the younger. So Brueggemann sort of has that almost rhetorical question. Is this all driven by God's prophecy that the older will serve the younger? Is she just living into it? Or because did she hear that oracle and then now she's like, well, then I'm going to make sure God's plan is solved. There's not an answer to that question. That's why he asks it rhetorically, but it is a mind bender of a question. Brueggemann then says, if Jacob and Rebekah act to fulfill the oracle, this might be a stretch. God has evoked the conflict. The conflict causes pain or shame to every player, but God does not shrink from the conflict, for a holy purpose is underway. Are we buying that one? Thoughts on Brueggemann's idea here?
What makes it holy?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question, Lynn. I don't know if there's anything that makes it holy.
I mean, it's sort of a self-definition. It's an act of God, so it must be holy.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that might be Brueggemann's argument, right? if God decreed it, then it has to be, but it sure doesn't seem that way.
And you get the feeling that, well, I think it's obvious that Jacob has always been Rebekah's favorite, and they have been, I would say, in collusion his entire life. I think that's what I picture anyway, that she wants to get him in a better position over his brother.
Yeah. Well, to peek ahead, one of the last lines of this, the last lines of the previous chapter was Jacob took some other wives and she wasn't too happy about it too. So you have to wonder if this is also a little payback within that structure too.
You mean Isaac? You mean Isaac, Bill? Not
Oh yeah,
Jacob.
Isaac. Sorry, yeah. Rebecca is mad because Isaac took 2 Hittite wives, and their relationship was never the same as the last chapter ended, right?
A couple of things about this, Bill. I see this story and the second creation story, I think, are very similar. Okay, and I think you're seeing humans at work in God. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's kind of, yeah. Okay, I mean, Rebecca is Eve in this situation. Okay, and yeah. Okay, so.
Oh, we got Stefan's going with the second Eve story here, huh? All right.
Yeah, well, not the second Eve story, second creation story. But okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Could be.
I mean, I compare this to that one. That's all.
Yeah.
And of course, a woman has
the catalyst. She's the catalyst in this one. You could argue that perhaps Satan is the catalyst in the second creation story, but it's 100% Rebecca. No one's prompting her at all that we can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
That we know about. Okay.
That we know, yes. Yes. Apart from all of us dealing with all of this in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with I like Lynn's the best for sure. I'm not sure what makes this holy necessarily. It's certainly I would agree that the conflict causes pain or shame to every single player. I don't know if God has necessarily evoked it because there's been a prediction. And who says the prediction wasn't someone after the fact sort of putting that on God? But yeah. So this is Brueggemann continues, and I think this is actually a little bit better, which is the story is fashioned deliberately to bring our sympathies to those who are beside the point. That is, we are sympathetic to Isaac and Esau, even though really their story becomes secondary because now it's becoming Jacob's story and Rebekah's story, right? Because it is done with such consummate skill, we may be confident that it was not an accident. It is a subtle but deliberate way of saying that the blessing will work in spite of human character and quality and in spite of our inclinations in another direction. The blessing of God has its way whether we are attracted to or repelled by the object of the blessing. The narrative shows God strangely at work for Jacob without regard for our emotions about Jacob. What do we think about that quote from Brueggemann?
Well, I think it brings up the point that sort of the viewpoint of the people, that there's so much that goes on that we can't understand, and we can't understand God's ways. We just have to be faithful and deal with them.
Yeah. Okay. Does everybody else see God working in this?
No, I was just gonna say, I thought it, to me, this refers right back to the comment you just made, that this is humans trying to work the system. I don't know. To me, this ties too closely into the narrative that, well, God has a plan, and if people are hurt or killed in the process, then it's okay because it's part of the plan. I don't buy into that.
Well, I think it's humans struggling to understand what they don't understand and ascribing what they don't understand to being an act of God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's certainly that, yes.
Which shows up over and over and over and over.
I think the part for me that I definitely agree with is the blessing of God has its way whether we are attracted to or repelled by the object of the blessing, right? Like I don't know if God's necessarily strangely at work for Jacob without our emotions, that sort of next line, but I can definitely agree with there are plenty of times where it seems to be like, wait, they seem to get all the breaks, right? Or they seem to be blessed, or God seems to be behind them for reasons that I don't understand because they do not seem to be the most wonderful, attractive, or perfect of persons, right?
Is there any significance to the food, to the meal? Or is there-
Not, I
or is
mean,
that just-
I'm sure there, you could make an argument for everything being significant, but I don't know of anything in particular. What, did you have something in mind, or?
No, I don't. I was just curious because the part of the text makes it sound like the blessing is transactional based on bringing him a meal. And I just wondered about that.
Mm.
I think, I mean, if we're gonna look at it sort of more holistically, it's more how you close the meal. Like breaking bread together is how you close the deal in this culture, right? Like what if you're
Okay.
talking about like someone getting engaged, you meet the girl, you ask her for water, then you go meet her family, and then it's not necessarily transactional as much as it is you break bread together as sort of a sign that there's an agreement,
Okay.
at least in that context. So if you take it over to this context, it's probably the same thing, which is I'm going to bless you. Just go get me some food, and then we'll sort of over lunch, breaking bread together, have this, share this blessing that it's a sort of way of closing the deal as a whole, right?
Okay.
There seems to be, there's lots of times where people break, are sort of have a disagreement. Well, and the chapter before, with Abimelech, they make an agreement and then they seal the agreement by sitting down and having a meal together, right? That's the sort of, now the Philistines and Isaac have made their agreement and they can now eat in peace together.
Okay.
There's an interesting text box in the message about God, and it's entitled God Used a Scoundrel, and it's referring back to chapter 25, but it talks about Jacob, God's use of Jacob as one of his charter members shocks us. Jacob came out of the womb grabbing the heel of his twin brother as if to trip him up and overtake him. He hadn't even cleared the birth canal when he started the kind of behavior that would characterize his whole life, grabbing by any means necessary to get ahead of whoever was in his way. And then the reason for God including such an unsightly gnarl on the bark of the Savior's family tree to make sure we don't disqualify ourselves from getting in on the Christian life by saying that we aren't good enough. God doesn't pick out the best and most promising people to make up the body of Christ. He picks scoundrels.
Interesting.
Unsavory gnarl on the bark of the family tree.
That's a great phrase, isn't it?
That's like the most brilliant thing I've heard in a month.
Yeah. I will say I would disagree with him on that, because if you were listening to the story of Abraham, he ain't exactly perfect either. Nor is Joseph, nor is a whole host of these folks, right? But I get the argument. I get the argument for sure. Jacob is not the ideal character you want.
But he's a human one.
He is a human one. So again, I love that second quote, but I differ from Brueggemann. He seems to focus almost on the sort of Lutheran ideal of salvation by grace. God does everything, we can only react. I'm an Episcopalian, so I don't really buy in that whole pure salvation. I think there's a little bit more interaction there, right? to what we're hitting, that is, I understand our lives and faith to be an interplay with God, not a God decrees and therefore we're all stuck doing it. I guess for me, it's that kind of thing that God works through our lives with both our good choices and our bad choices. It's just that sometimes folks take, steal, outwit, scheme, fraud. They're the scoundrel in that gnarled bark, right? And that can just be our choice, not God's choice. I guess we can, this is sort of tricky, right? Because it's how much truly do we have free will, and how much is God's deep understanding of who we are that then God can use to manipulate things to get to where God wants it to be, or to plan it, right? But for me, I think you can help with God's plan, and we can make God's plans more difficult other times. But it's the question for me, the most fundamental question is, what would have happened if Jacob and Rebekah just come in and said, hey, can Jacob have a blessing first, or can there be a blessing for both sons? Right? I mean, that's the part that I find fascinating about this sort of understanding that the blessing can only be for one, and you have to steal it or have it, and it's that important, is the part that I find fascinating. Because part of me wants to say, could anyone just talk to Isaac and ask him for a blessing for both sons at the same time? And yes, you could probably say, well, Jacob gets this and Esau gets this or something, but it's this really weird all or nothing kind of model, right? I mean, after
Yeah, it's
all,
like
these
this
are
idea of grace as a zero-sum game.
right. Yeah. I mean, or if Jacob had just talked to his brother and said, hey, we're twins, for the love of Pete. Yes, you were born like a minute ahead of me, but we are twins. It's not like I'm the younger brother by 20 years and from a different mom or something like that. I'm a half brother or something. It's just strange. Yeah. We have this idea it's a zero-sum game, and that there's just no way that you can address it otherwise. Anyway, I mean, that's my thoughts on some of this.
Well, I think Isaac might have gone for it because, I mean, really, if someone had talked to him, he seemed pretty pliable about things.
He certainly seems that way. I guess maybe he was more traditional. Who knows?
I mean, I don't know if he would have been traditional about that because it had always been done that way, but you don't know.
So much
Yeah.
for the significance of being the firstborn.
Yeah, doesn't mean anything in this story, that's for sure.
Mhm.
So Brueggemann has a lot to say about blessing that I want to look at for just a minute, because that is what they're ultimately fighting about, right? That's what the plot's for. That's what Esau wants. It's what Jacob and Rebekah want. So what does it mean, right? So the big thing I think we have to do is we have to engage Jacob and Rebekah and their deception to advance their interests on a very clear level. That is, we have to look to just sort of go, what do they want, right? Why is this so important? And Brueggemann's real idea here is that regardless of what we think of blessing in the 21st century, clearly in whatever century this was, the maybe 10th century BC, something like that, that they would absolutely say that the blessing mattered and was worth stealing and lying for, right? So I've got some quotes from Brueggemann after the next part, but I think the important thing is, while we could sort of take it apart and wonder, why is it so important? That clearly the characters involved all believe it's this important, right? It's almost something more important enough to kill for, quite frankly.
Well, this blessing is all about monetary things, though. I mean, isn't it? Isn't this blessing that you get
Yeah.
everything?
You get everything that Isaac has, but you also get the sort of, and this is the part that I find fascinating about it, there's certainly the implication that you get God and the brother doesn't, right? That God becomes your best friend and he's covenanted with Abraham and Isaac, and so the blessing now becomes your blessing. That covenant becomes the Jacob or Esau's blessing, and the promise goes through them. So you don't just get the goats and the camels and the land, you also get God to back up what you're doing.
You know, something that I see through this is the thing about Rebecca and I mean, I think what she did was bad, but I'm thinking also that if he had, maybe she felt threatened by these other wives, and if her son, if Jacob, and she and Jacob were in this together, and if he gets the blessing, then she, as his mother, would always be taken care of.
Right.
Of course, I guess with Esau, she should have been too. She's mother to him, but
Yeah.
but she
Just
wanted Jacob.
Twins.
What, Stefan?
The twin. She's the mother of both children.
She's
so I
mother
don't
of
know-
both, but for some reason she
I don't know
wants
that about
Jacob. She should have been taken care of in both ways, but for some reason she wants Jacob to be the winner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll look
Yeah.
at the next section, which is that Isaac and Jacob, the actual deception. So he came to his father and said, "Father," he said, "here I am, Hanani." So Hanani, I quoted it before, and I don't think I actually have a slide on it, but Hanani is a Hebrew word. It's the one that is said 3 or 4 different times. It's 4 different times in the binding of Isaac, or sacrifice of Isaac. It's what Moses says at the burning bush. It's not just "here I am." It has this idea of I am fully present and ready for what's next. It's sort of the like attention. One of my Hebrew teachers said it was sort of like when a soldier reports duty, right? I'm ready to receive my orders kind of response. So it's not just I'm here, not just a sort of like present. It's ready for the next thing, ready to get my commands and tell me what I need to do, kind of thing. So Hanani, "Which one are you, my son?" Yaakov said to his father. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you spoke to me. Pray, arise, sit, and eat from my hunted game, that you may give me your own blessing." Yitzhak said to his son, how did you find it so hastily, my son? He said, "Indeed, the Lord your God made it happen for me." Yitzhak said to Yaakov, "Pray, come closer, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." And Yaakov moved closer to Yitzhak, his father, and he felt him and said, "The voice is Yaakov's voice, the hands are Esau's hands." But he did not recognize him, for his hands were like the hands of Esau, his brother, hairy. Now he was about to bless him. When he said, "Are you sure, my son?" he said, "I am." And so he said, "Bring it close to me. I will eat from the hunted game of my son in order that I may give you my own blessing." And he put it close to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then Yitzhak, his father, said to him, "Pray come close and kiss me, my son." He came close and kissed him, and now he smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. So may God give you from the dew of the heavens, from the fat of the earth, along with much grain and new wine. May peoples serve you. May tribes bow down to you. Be master to your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. Those who damn you, damned. Those who bless you, blessed." There's the blessing, right? That's the whole 2 verses of the blessing. So what we have, Jacob lies to his father. He deceives him twice verbally, saying he is Esau, and twice with touch. That is, there's the fake skin and the wearing of his clothes, right? So there's a lot of work that Jacob has had to do to deceive his father. It was not just walk in and say, "Yeah, it's me," kind of system. The deception is deep, right? So here we'll jump into blessing a little bit more that caused this so much trouble. And this is a Brueggemann quote again. So the family in Genesis is preoccupied with blessing as though it matters more than things visible. And it is here sought and given. The blessing combines or as it is here sought and given. The power combines all of the primitive power of spoken word with the high theological claim of special vocation for its addressee. There is no blessing without that life-changing claim. That there's this sort of spokenness and this vocation that are combined here, right? Or as he continues, symbolic actions have genuine and abiding power. There are no empty gestures in this story, right? Like if you say it, it means it. So spoken words shape human life. Blessings are intergenerational. These are all the ideas that Brueggemann has, right? That their symbolic actions have genuine abiding power. Spoken words shape human life. Blessings are intergenerational. And a fresh discernment on the nature of power, that is the capacity to shape the future, lies in the use of language, gesture, and symbol, but not in weapons. Right? That's what Brueggemann understands blessing in this case to be. Not one that, I don't know, it's just on Abraham, but it can be passed on to Isaac and then to Jacob. That those actions are not purely symbolic, but they have real power, right? So the narrator seems unaware of the incongruity that may appear to us that this is a blessing gotten by deception, right? It seems like something as holy and sacred as blessing shouldn't be able to be stolen, that it would be null and void because of that. But we were just presented with the matter, the way the story is told is, guess what? It's the blessing that matters, not how you got it. Which is a fascinating thing, which may be why we get so uncomfortable with this story, right? That we go, well, okay, fine. Someone deserves a blessing or doesn't deserve a blessing, but you can't just steal it. And that in this case, it's irretractable. You can't take a blessing back. Certainly, I would say it's not our theology of blessing, but what do we think about Brueggemann's take on blessing? I think it helps maybe unpack it a little, understand the story a little, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with it necessarily.
I don't see why it couldn't be taken back because it was all by deception. I never understood that, but
No.
okay, but they didn't. They left it.
Yeah, in the study notes for the NRSV, it says deathbed blessings and curses were important in the life and literature of ancient peoples. It was believed that such blessings irrevocably released a tangible power that determined the character and destiny of the recipient.
Think about that when you think about what all goes on in the business world today and all the miscreants who are out there doing things they shouldn't be doing. I mean, maybe they got their daddy's blessing. I mean, does that give them the right to steal?
Okay.
No, it does. I
I've
mean,
always,
go ahead.
I've always questioned why this deception is necessary. Hadn't he already deceived Esau out of birthright?
Yeah.
I mean, he already done that. So I'm just trying to think why this was all necessary.
Well, I do think that's the sort of fundamental question in the story, right? Is why is this necessary? Other than to prove once again that Jacob is the heel grabber, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, which I think is what Brueggemann was saying in that first quote, right? Which is, ooh, neither Rebecca nor Jacob come out looking like anything other than conniving, malicious, backstabbing kind of folk, right? I mean, I almost feels more like a character study to a certain degree on them than it is necessarily about the blessing itself. I mean, Brueggemann spends a lot of time talking about the blessing, but I'm not sure if that's what the story is all about as much as it's about to show that Jacob will do anything to get ahead. And he learned it from his mama, quite frankly.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the other part of the story is we very clearly get is Jacob might have been that way from birth, but he had somebody nurturing him in the practice and art.
Right.
of deception.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because without her preparing the skins on his arms and neck and giving Jacob the clothes, it wouldn't have worked, right?
Mm-mm.
Because Jacob would have felt his hands or his neck and
Right.
given him a hug and would have smelled him and said, you're Jacob, you're not
Yeah,
Esau.
because the voice was different. So.
Right. Right.
And he obviously, they said he was almost blind, so he couldn't see his son.
Right.
Oh,
So one of my favorite sermons I've ever heard on this story, it was 2003, right after Gene Robinson had been elected bishop and the church was tearing itself apart about gay marriage, gay bishops, the whole 9 yards. And this was the reading that came up for that particular Sunday at the seminary. And one of the seminarians said, using this as the exact example, Jacob and Esau tear apart their family because there's a belief that there's only one blessing for the family. And I would say the same thing to Jacob and Esau as I would say to the church now, that why can there not be blessings for everyone?
Mhm.
Right? Which was I thought it was a brilliant way of having that conversation. But it also has always then helped me talk about this story where I just go, why can't Jacob just turn around and say the same blessing for Esau or a similar blessing for Esau, right? It's this weird, I mean, that's the story holds us hostage. We don't get to ask that question completely, but it is the fundamental question of the story is why can't Isaac more creatively say, oh, Esau, I love you. No problem. Here, get this. You know, I mean, like, here's this blessing. Here's this way of moving forward. We can all be blessed. There's more options. Grace is not limited to one person and one person only, right?
right. You're twins, you know.
And they're twins. That part always seems to get lost in the story.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are brothers, aren't they?
Yep, they're not just brothers, they're clearly fraternal, not identical, right? I mean, everything about them is like
It's different.
one's hairy, one's smooth, one likes to be outside, one likes to be inside, and one's almost a dullard, quite frankly. I mean, Esau seems like an idiot most of the time, and Jacob is the clever one, right? I mean, but there's definitely that they're different people, but they are still twins. All right, so we'll look ahead. So how do we understand human blessing as part of this, right? I've also taught, I taught one at Holy Innocents, an end of life class that asks people to engage this text, and it's never worked. It's never ever worked. That is, how do we leave in our wills words beyond the physical, literal things? People are happy in those classes to go like, well, I'll give the leather couch to my daughter and my son will get the recliner, right? Or something like that. People will talk about that all day. But trying to talk about what blessing do you want for your children does seem to have a power on us that people don't want to engage even now, which I found interesting. I found fascinating about it. That is, there is almost a belief that, like, if we were to say, bless our daughter with something, then our son couldn't have it, or vice versa, right? If we have 10 children, how would I possibly be able to say enough that each of them felt like they got an equal share of blessing, right? So it's an interesting, there is something that I can say that is far more elemental about blessing than we want to admit, that class has shown me, right? Where I'll go, why don't you write as part of your last will and testament, a sort of blessing? Because there's this blessing, there's Moses and his departure blessing that he prays over Israel. There's Jesus in his last, certainly in the Gospel of John, has a whole series of prayers and blessings for his disciples as he leaves them. There's lots of precedents in the text for people when they're getting ready to leave, blessing the people they love.
Mhm.
But wow, it's fascinating how uncomfortable, every time I've taught that class, people are really uncomfortable and unwilling to engage that, because I don't know if they don't feel like they have the right to bless, or if they are fearful of what that power actually is, right? That there is something elemental in us that says, yeah, blessing does matter. And granting something to someone does have more than symbolic power, right? And so it begs that question, what blessing do you seek to impart?
right. I think I shared that I have a dear friend, Laurel, who died a good many years ago now, but she had terminal cancer. And so she knew that she was going to die and her children were still young. And at that time, she wrote these letters, but I don't think anyone felt that theirs was more important than another one. She left it for her husband, for her children, for her siblings. And each of those letters just said the things that she appreciated about that person, what had, she really appreciated about them, and some of it, her blessing and her hopes and dreams for them, for their future. It was all just a real positive, and they all said what a great gift that was. But I don't think anyone felt that theirs was more, it was individual, and I don't think they felt like, I don't know if they even shared their letters or if it was just a private thing that they kept. But I know they've said they read them over and over. So, I mean, that would be.
No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, I think that's exactly the point, that they are really, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they don't share them with each other.
It's
I think
just
they
a
are
private thing.
powerful.
What I appreciate about you, what I, and
Yeah.
my hopes and dreams for your future, what I hope your future will be, and just positive things. She was such a positive person. Everyone felt like they got the best letter. They all felt like they got a wonderful letter from their mother and their wife and sibling. So, but I can see where that would be. I haven't done that, so I can see where to sit down and do that would be.
I think it's very emotional. I think part of it is the emotion of it, and that would be hard. But again, I do think that there is a certain intimacy and power to it that makes when we get into this story and become the first person, we become Isaac, we can understand maybe a little bit more sympathetically about why you would have a blessing for a specific person too. Right? Like, I want this for Esau. I want this for Jacob. And it's a little bit different in that context, I think. Or at least I can be empathetic that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up. Other thoughts on blessings? We could talk about it all day, because blessing does have a lot of power, to be sure. So looking at the rest of the chapter here real fast. Now it was when Yitzhak had finished blessing Yaakov. Yes, it was. Yaakov had just gone out from the presence of Yitzhak, his father, that Esau, his brother, came back from his hunting. He too had made a delicacy and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat from the hunted game of his son, that you may give me your own blessing." Yitzhak, his father, said to him, "Which one are you?" He said, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." Yitzhak trembled with very great trembling and said, "Who then was he that hunted down hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it all before you came, and I gave him my blessing. Now blessed he must remain." Esau heard the words of his father. He cried out with a very great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, me also, father." He said, "Your brother came with deceit and took away your blessing." He said, "Is that why his name was called Yaakov, heel sneak?" Which was, if you recall, it was heel grabber before. Now he's a sneak. For he has now sneaked against me twice. My firstborn right he took, and now he has taken my blessing. He said, "Haven't you reserved a blessing for me?" Yitzhak answered, saying to Esau, "Here, I have made him master to you and all his brothers. I have given him as servants. With grain and new wine I have invested him. So for you, what then can I do, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Have you only a single blessing, father? Bless me also." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Yitzhak his father answered, saying to him, behold, from the fat of the earth must be your dwelling, from your dwelling place, from the dew of the heavens above. You will live by your sword, you will serve your brother. But it will be that when you brandish it, you will tear his yoke from your neck. Oh, yeah. So this ends the story of both blessing and theft and revelation of deceit, right? So a couple of notes. That is, we'll engage it, but we also need to see the conclusion. That is the human cost. So just to look at the rest, what's the result, right? So now Esau held a grudge against Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, that the days of mourning for my father draw near, and then I will kill Yaakov, my brother. Yeah, that's the least surprising turn in history, huh? And Rivkah was told of the words of Esau, her older son, and she sent and called for Yaakov, her younger son, and said to him, here, Esau, your brother, is consoling himself about you with the thought of killing you. So now, my son, listen to my voice. Arise and flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him for some days until your brother's fury has turned away, until his anger turns away from you and he forgets what you did to him. Then I will send and have you taken from there, for should I be bereaved of you both in a single day? So, at the end, Esau and Isaac are both heartbroken about all that has happened. They're both in a mess, right? Isaac musters terrible blessings about throwing off the yoke of his brother, but describes a life of wandering and threats and ultimately serving Jacob, right? Which truly, on some level, if we really are listening, I have to say Isaac, to a certain degree, is the villain here, because his plan from start was to bless Esau in such a way almost as to punish Jacob, right? I mean, it was not really much of a power sharing agreement, or these are two of my sons and I'm going to make sure they're both taken care of. I mean, he pretty much, Esau's my favorite and I'm giving him everything, even if the birthright is Jacob got, Esau is going to get everything else. So I'm not sure Isaac is as innocent. He's certainly old and gets tricked, but the way he crafted this blessing to have nothing left for the other child, woo, that's pretty harsh by any estimation, right? But give full credit to the story, the costs are not hidden, right? This is a quote from Brueggemann. It's ironic that the bearer of the blessing becomes a fugitive. He's a fugitive from the well-ordered world of law. The world can little tolerate persons who seize blessings and find ways to have birthrights by intrigue. He constitutes a threat to the known inhabitable life world, and through Jacob is thrust into an inimical existence, or though, that should be though Jacob is thrust into an inimical existence, he's been offered alternatives beyond the world's usual assumptions. That is the perilous, hopeful way of God. Brueggemann wants to pull on that thread so hard that it's God's plan. I'm not sure that I'm buying all of that, but that's Brueggemann's argument and through line here as well. This is God's story, it's God's plan. Or Jacob's got the natural results of doing nasty things. Certainly, we can say Esau appears to be the short-term winner. Jacob runs, he hides, and Esau is at home with his dad and seems to be the sort of master of the house in Jacob's absence, right? The role maintained of Esau being the eldest despite these blessings and claims to birthrights. Thoughts as we look at the unfolding of it, of the story with Esau, with all of this side. It's heartbreaking, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, I think part of it's, this ideological, notion that this sort of explains how things got to be the way they are, and that no one can know the ways of God. It's only the role of humans to deal with it. But on the other hand, the whole story of every time I think about the stolen birthright and all the ramifications, I keep thinking about election fraud. And it's like, oh, well, gosh, we don't know where these votes came from, but gosh, you're the winner. We can't look into that. So it doesn't work that way in today's world.
That's a good one. Linda.
Yep.
I'm all curious, whatever happened to Isaac the peacemaker?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Good
What
question.
happened indeed?
It's like he completely changed his personality here at the end.
Mhm.
His age or something, right?
It's something.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we've seen this characterization that he's not a particularly strong, assertive kind of guy.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, he's not that. He is not assertive. He's very passive and seems to be easily tricked.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not supposedly the smartest guy on the block, but okay.
We've
Nope.
always had that question about.
It doesn't, and it sounds Esau took after his father, okay?
Yes, in more ways than one. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Mm.
Many more ways than goodness. Yeah, so next week, so we will just go with next week. I'll be back and we'll now that we've caught up on the recording side of things, we'll jump into the next part, which is the trickster gets tricked. I've always loved the turn next, which Jacob, who thinks he can trick anybody, goes to meet his uncle, who turns out to be a bigger trickster than he is. Which I don't know, there's poetic justice in that. There's good old karma in that, if you want to use it that, but it's a fascinating turn of events to watch. Like, oh, you think you're a trickster? Big runs in the family, boss.
It must be in his mother's family because that's
Very
his
clearly in his mother's family.
Exactly, yeah, it's in the mother's DNA, got it.
That'll be-
The apple and the tree, right? They're not falling far from.
Well, it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. Good to be with y'all today, my friends. Anything else before we go? All right. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Take care,
Wait.
everyone. Bye. Have a good day.